In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So God willing, today we're going to study chapters 6 and 7 of the book of First Maccabees. So we've already read through the first 5 chapters. Does anyone want to try to give us an overview of kind of what's been happening so far in the book and the historical context? There's several new people here today. Anybody have an idea? So first, what is the historical context of this book? When does the events of this book take place?
After the life of Alexander the Great.
Right. So after the reign of Alexander the Great, what happened after Alexander the Great? When he died, what happened?
His kingdom was split between his generals.
Right. So he had 4 main generals. His kingdom was split among the generals. Okay, and one of the kingdoms, the one that we're focusing on here, is called the Seleucid Empire. Okay, the Seleucid Empire. And who was the king here in the beginning of First Maccabees? Do you remember his name? Antiochus IV. Okay, very good. And what was he doing at the beginning of when we start the book?
Trying to integrate the peoples, to Hellenize the people.
Right. So Israel was one of the countries that was under the jurisdiction of the Seleucid Empire. So Seleucids, they're Greeks, okay? So their Greek culture, Greek mythology, paganism, all of that, that we know about, like Greek mythology, they believed in all of that. And obviously the Israelites did not believe that. And unlike the Romans that they kind of came after them, the Seleucids, they did not leave Israel with the freedom to practice their religion as they did. If you read in the New Testament, the Jews had synagogues, they were able to practice the Sabbath, they circumcised their children, they did all the things of the law that the Jews were supposed to do, and the Romans allowed them to do that as long as they paid taxes. And they kind of had allegiance to Caesar as the emperor, but apart from that, paying taxes and seeing Caesar as the king, they could kind of be free to practice whatever religion they wanted. That's in the New Testament. That's under the Romans. Prior to that, which is where we are right now, under the Greeks, okay, they did not leave them this kind of freedom, right? They wanted them to become Hellenized, meaning to become Greek, to adopt the Greek culture and to worship the Greek gods and to do everything according to the Greeks. Okay, so at the beginning of this book, we see that the Seleucids under King Antiochus are trying to convert, first peacefully and then later on not so peacefully, the Israelites to the Greek culture. Okay, and as we read at the beginning, we saw that the Israelites kind of divided roughly into one of 3 camps of the way that they responded to the Seleucids trying to convert them. What are the 3 main groups that formed at that time?
Compliers, those who want to comply, like to be Hellenized, like, and so like in hopes they would have like high positions. Since they have the initiative. The second group were like who refused to break the Sabbath, and then the third who they actually did took a stand and fought.
Right, very good. So the first group, like what Sharif said, are the group that they're just like, okay, well, we want to be with whoever's in power. So if the Greeks are going to come and be in power, we're going to go to them, we're going to make deals with them, they're going to make us like high officials or whatever, and we're going to promote the Greek culture among the Jews. This is against God's commandments, okay? They started building stadiums, to practice like the Greek blood sports, like when you think of the gladiators fighting and like all that kind of stuff that was happening, like a very brutal type of thing in different sports and stuff like that. Even things much more vicious than that. For instance, they prevented the people from being circumcised. They killed those people who were circumcised, and any parents who wanted to circumcise their children, they would kill. They desecrated the temple. They took all of the vessels of the temple. They didn't allow people to practice the Sabbath. They didn't allow people to offer sacrifices. All of the things in the law that the Jewish practice that were kind of uniquely Jewish, uniquely according to the Jewish faith, they prevented them from doing. So there was this group among the Jews that are like, okay, fine. we're not going to practice our Jewish faith anymore. We're going to become Hellenized. We're going to become like the Greek culture, and they're totally fine with that. And a lot of it had to do with selfish motive or with fear. Either we're too afraid that what's going to happen to us if we remain faithful, or we just want to be with whoever's in power, and we're going to have a good opportunity to kind of gain power and gain influence with the Greeks when we go and make that move. So that was the first group. The second group that Sharif mentioned was the group that was just kind of, they were very faithful. They were going to stick to their faith. They weren't going to change anything about what they believed. And even if it meant they were going to die, and they died. They were martyred, okay, as a result. They didn't try to fight back. They didn't offer any kind of resistance. Essentially, people are coming to attack them, and it's on the Sabbath day, and they are not allowed to work. They're not allowed to fight back. They're not allowed to do anything, and they just allow themselves to be killed, okay? The third group was the group that said, look, if we don't fight back, they're very clever, the Greeks, right? They know that if they attack us on the Sabbath day and we're not allowed to fight back, they're going to wipe us out. They're going to destroy us. So they said, if we don't fight back, even if they attack us on the Sabbath day, we're going to be wiped out, right? So they decided that not only are they going to fight back, but they're going to fight back even if it's on the Sabbath. Because why? Not because they want to break the commandment of God or because they don't revere it, but because they're trying to actually make it possible for them to practice the Sabbath. Because if they don't do anything, then they're going to be wiped out. So we said how the spirit of the Sabbath, right, was a day where we can dedicate to God in order to serve Him, but being killed on that day is not serving that purpose, right? So we said God was not against the fact that they broke the Sabbath, because they broke it for what purpose? They broke it for the purpose of being restored to God, not for the purpose of not wanting to be with God. So then arose on the scene, okay, a family, and the head of the family, do you remember his name? Mattathias, right, okay. And this man, Mattathias, he was of this family of the Maccabees. We call them the Maccabees family, okay. And he is the first one who started this revolution, essentially, through his refusal to offer sacrifice, to offer incense to the idols. They tried to pressure him to do so, and he refused, and he took with him his family and all the other people who supported him, okay. And this is what began the movement. And this is why the book is called the Maccabees, because it's very much centering on this family who served as the catalyst to protect the entire nation and attract other faithful Jews to join their resistance and their movement. Mattathias, he dies, and then after him, the main character, his name is Judas Maccabees, okay? And he is the one who is the leader of the military, and most of the other stories kind of focus around him as the leader of the army that is doing battle. And we see now that they start having victory after victory after victory. They expel the Greeks, they destroy them, they kill them, even when the Greek army is larger than them, battle after battle after battle, they beat them. And they restore so many things in Israel. They restore the offering of sacrifices. They go and they allow the circumcision of children. They allow people to practice the Sabbath. They restore everything. They even completely rededicate the temple again. They built a new altar, right, that was desecrated, the first one. They get vessels and they remake all of the vessels again for them to offer everything. So you see, like, they're like God working with them to restore everything that happened with the Greeks. Okay? One last thing as kind of an overview is we spoke about the spiritual kind of symbolism behind this book, right? That it's kind of like Israel represents like the human soul, okay? And when the human soul is no longer faithful to God and goes after other gods, then we become defiled and desecrated, right? But there's always a chance, there's always like room for repentance and restoration. And we see this happening. We see like the sin of Israel, we see the destruction of Israel, and we see the restoration again. Okay? And it's important to understand that the destruction of Israel did not happen as it had previously, right? Like in previous times, there was actual destruction, like physically destroy the whole place. Here it wasn't as much physical destruction as it was the spiritual destruction. The city itself remained intact, because they wanted the city, the Greeks, they wanted the city. They started to build stadiums and other things in it. They didn't want to destroy the city, they wanted to conquer the city. They wanted to change the mentality of the people, right? And this is, in some respects, an even greater conquering, right? To destroy the faith of the people, even while the people remain, right? As opposed to completely wiping them out altogether. right? So like it's like when we are convinced to live according to the world is worse than if we are just completely wiped out. Okay, and this is kind of here the context of this book. Any questions about this before we continue with chapter 6? Okay. Now, if you remember, King Antiochus, he appointed someone to conduct the war for him. Remember his name? Starts with an L. Lysias. Okay? Why did he do that? Because King Antiochus, so it's there's going to be a lot of names, and the names can kind of get confusing. So Antiochus IV is the king. His son is named Antiochus also, Antiochus V. So Antiochus IV, the king, he needed more money in order to continue with the war against the Jews. Now the Jews had this big resistance against him, and they had all these battles, so he couldn't afford it anymore. So instead of him leading the war, he appointed someone whose name was Lysias as the commander of the army, of part of the army, and he told him, go into wage war and also raise my son in my absence, because I'm going to go to Persia and try to get money in order to continue fighting the war. Okay, so in the previous few chapters, the main antagonist is Lysias. He is the one who we're reading about of what he's doing, what his strategy is, and how he's battling against the Jews. Antiochus is not really being mentioned. Okay, here we're now coming back to seeing what's happening with Antiochus. The last we heard of him, he was in Persia doing something, and now we get to have more information about what exactly he was doing. And King Antiochus was traveling through the upper regions, and he heard that the city of Elymais in Persia was very noble and abundant in silver and gold, and that the temple in it was very opulent, and there were in that place coverings of gold and breastplates and shields, which Alexander the son of Philip, king of Macedonia, who reigned first in Greece, had left behind. Who was Alexander the son of Philip?
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great, right? He is the ancestor of all of this. Okay? Remember, it all started where Alexander the Great was the supreme ruler of the Greek Empire, and then later it broke into the four, and then each of the four now also have dynasties, right? And eventually King Antiochus became the king, and then before him there were other kings. Okay? So he came and sought to seize the city and to pillage it, and he was not able, because this plan became known to those who were in the city. Right? So he's in Persia. He's trying to attack a city just to get the money from it. And they rose up in battle, and he fled away from there, and he departed with great sadness and returned to Babylon. So he failed. He could not get the money he needed from the city. And someone arrived to report to him in Persia that those who were in the land of Judah were forced to flee the camp, and that Lysias went forth with a particularly strong army, and he was forced to flee before the face of the Jews, and that they were strengthened by the weapons and resources and many spoils which they seized from the camps they demolished. And they had destroyed the abomination which he had established on the altar and was in Jerusalem, and that the sanctuary, just as before, had been encircled with high walls, along with Beth-zur his city. So Antiochus, now again, a long time ago, there wasn't easy communication back and forth, right? So Antiochus had no idea what was going on in Judah, right? He had left Lysias in charge to conquer the Jews, to take over everything. And before Antiochus left, they had already made a lot of progress in that, but there was resistance. So now a messenger is coming to Antiochus when he's in Persia, and he's essentially telling him the Jews are taking everything back. Right? They keep demolishing our camps. They're getting more resources. They rebuilt the temple. This abomination, we read about it here in verse 7, and they had destroyed the abomination which had been established on the altar. What is this abomination?
Pig.
Sorry?
The pig.
So there was something they had placed on the altar.
Pork.
No, it was not pork. It was an idol of Zeus that had been placed on the altar. This abomination is mentioned in the book of Daniel as a prophecy that's referred to as the abomination of desolation, referring to the future as something that was going to happen, right, to defile the temple. And this was one of the fulfillments of that prophecy. Okay, the abomination of desolation. So they removed it. They destroyed it. Okay, they rebuilt the whole altar. In fact, okay, and they had built it just as before, and they rebuilt the walls around it, because one of the things that the Greeks had done is destroyed the walls, and Jerusalem was vulnerable. So he's hearing all of this. And it happened that when the king heard these words, he was terrified and very moved, and he fell down on his bed, and he fell into feebleness out of grief, for it had not happened to him as he had intended. Like, he went insane and so sorrowful and depressed because of this news that the Jews had undone everything that he had done. And he was in that place through many days, for a great grief was renewed in him, and he concluded that he would die. And he called all his friends, and he said to them, "Sleep has withdrawn from my eyes, and I am declining, and my heart has collapsed out of anxiety. And I said in my heart, how much trouble has come to me, and what floods of sorrow there are. Where I am now, I used to be cheerful and beloved in my power." Okay? So what does this tell us about the king in the things that he's saying?
He recognizes that there is no regaining what he had in the past.
Yes, that's one. He realizes how much he's lost. Okay? But what does that tell us about kind of his personality?
He feels like the Jew like worship the true God and like being he reviewed himself basically like and start being not confident about what he's doing.
Well, I mean, he's suffering stress and depression and anxiety because of his failure, right? But he's not saying here, okay, I believe in the God of the Jews. Like, he's not saying that. Like, for instance, like Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, whenever he saw Daniel's friends like out of the fiery furnace, he believed in God, right?
Yeah.
But here we don't see any indication from King Antiochus here that he like has like this newfound faith or he believes in God. He's just depressed. I mean, he like his entire identity is based on this. And if he cannot accomplish this, then it's like he's so sorrowful to the point of death that he wants to die. Okay, and that's the thing. It's like sometimes we place our identity in something wrong. And when that thing is taken from us, we feel like we have lost ourselves and we fall into just despair and sorrow and we can't ever come out of it again. You know, like it shows you really how powerful like the human psychology is, that, you know, we can be so sorrowful that it actually leads us to death. Like that's and he's going to die. Antiochus is going to die. "Truly now I remember the evils that I did in Jerusalem, from which place I also took away all the spoils of gold and silver that were in it, and I sent to carry away the inhabitants of Judah without cause." Now he's starting to say, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done this. "Therefore I know that it is because of this that these evils have found me, and behold, I perish with great sorrow in a foreign land." So in the end, he concluded that this is happening to him because of what he did. He doesn't believe in the God of the Jews, but he feels
Be suspicious.
he feels like this is like that his actions have brought this. And you know, even in Greek religion, the idea of, you know, that your actions are going to be judged, something not uncommon. I mean, it exists there. Even if he didn't believe in the God of the Jews, he at least believed that he was somehow being judged, that there was something like judging his actions as being unworthy, as being immoral. Okay, and he's saying, you know what, I'm perishing now, and I shouldn't have ever done what it is that I did. But the next step is he never tried to correct it. Like, he was still the king. He could have said, okay, you know what? Everything I did was wrong, so I'm going to go back now. I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to retreat from there. I'm going to apologize to those people. I'm going to let them have their freedom, whatever the case might be. And this is the difference between sorrow and repentance, right? This is the difference between Judas and Peter. Judas, he acknowledged that what he had done wrong when he betrayed Christ. He even returned the silver pieces that he got from the Pharisees. But he was so sorrowful and didn't have any hope in repentance that he killed himself, right? So even though from the outside, like if you read the story of Judas right before the part where he hangs himself, you would almost conclude that the next thing is he was going to repent and be accepted again. Like, you know, sometimes we think that, well, Judas is like the most evil possible person and he could never be accepted. Actually, he was going to be accepted. Christ accepted Peter. Why wouldn't he have accepted Judas? But he didn't have hope. He didn't believe he could change. And so he didn't even try to change. He didn't even try to take a step toward repentance and change. Same thing with Antiochus here. Having now known all of this, the next step would be, now I can undo it, I can fix it, I can do something. I mean, he can't obviously bring back the lives of those people who died, but he can at least make things better moving forward after acknowledging his sin. Sometimes it's easier for us just to continue to live in depression rather than to admit that we are wrong, especially admitting that we're wrong to other people. You know, like if you were going to go back and say, you know what, I was wrong. I shouldn't have attacked you. I shouldn't have done any of this. Like it's embarrassing, right? And of course, there's going to be a huge backlash against him, and so he didn't have hope that he could be saved.
I can say that he can start like in the beginning. Maybe he was thinking that he find as a Greek, and he didn't know they are like the right people. Like he find thinking that I'm the one strong, powerful, I'm the right one. But whenever it's happened that for him, he in the point of being suspicious and not confidence. Like he review himself. What happened to me? If I'm the one who right or they are right. So he's not he didn't get to the point like being believed 100% that they are right and he's totally wrong. That's the reason why that happened. But he being review himself the point like he's not sure like I'm right or wrong. That's the reason why he's not admit to get to the admit yes they like this is their God is the true God and that's what's supposed to be submit for him because he didn't yet like get to that point like
I mean, it's not clear how much of that happened, but it's clear that he definitely acknowledged that what he did was wrong.
yeah
And it might be that he's thinking about the God of, you know, of the Jews, but it's never said that he is. But it's possible. You know, it's possible. Then he called Philip, one of his friends. Okay, so remember, we heard about Philip a few verses ago, speaking about Philip, the father of Alexander the Great. Okay, that's King Philip. This is a different Philip, right? So he had a friend. This is the first time we hear about this person. There's a friend of Antiochus called Philip, okay, and he placed him first over all his kingdom. So his son, Antiochus V, is too young now to be king, right? So he can't just start leading the nation as king. So he put Philip to be kind of the one that's responsible until Antiochus grows up enough to become the king. And he gave him the diadem and his robe and his ring so that he would guide Antiochus, his son, and raise him, and so that he would reign. And King Antiochus died there in the 149th year. So Philip is essentially now like in place of the king until Antiochus V, the son of the previous Antiochus, grows up. And Lysias, now remember, Lysias is the commander that was left by Antiochus in Judah. Lysias knew that the king was dead, and he appointed Antiochus his son to reign, whom he had raised from adolescence, and he called his name Eupator. Okay, so that's the name that was given to the son of Antiochus IV. Do you remember Antiochus IV? His name was Epiphanes, which means God manifest, right? So he has like a God complex. He considers himself to be like a deity. And those who were in the stronghold had enclosed the Israelites by surrounding the holy places, and they continually sought to do evil to them and to support the Gentiles. Okay, so this is now we're getting back to the battle, right? So there's this stronghold, okay, and the Israelites are in it, and the Gentiles are like surrounding them to attack. And Judas intended to disperse them, and he called together all the people in order to besiege them, to besiege these Gentiles that are enclosing the Israelites. And they came together and besieged them in the 150th year, and they made catapults and other machines. And certain ones of those who were besieged escaped, and some of the impious out of Israel joined themselves to them. So some of the Gentiles they attacked escaped, and some of the Jews betrayed the Jews, and they went and joined themselves to the Gentiles. And they went to the king, and they said, "How long will you not act with judgment and vindicate our brothers? We resolve to serve your father and to walk according to his precepts and to obey his edicts." And because of this, the sons of our people have alienated themselves from us, and they have put to death as many of us as they could find, and they have torn apart our inheritances. Okay, so they're coming to the king, the son of the king, and they're saying to him, come and take care of the situation. Like, this war is waging, and we want you to have victory. And they have extended their hand against us, and they have not extended their hand against us only, but also against all within our borders. And behold, this day they have taken the position near the stronghold of Jerusalem to occupy it, and they have fortified the stronghold of Beth-zur. Okay, so who are some of these people who are saying this to the king? Some of them were Jews. They're saying, come and kill these other Jews that are resisting, right? We want to convert the whole nation, and everyone adopts the same culture. And unless you quickly act to prevent them, they will do greater things than these, and you will not be able to subdue them. And the king was angry when he heard this, and he called together all his friends and the leaders of his army and those who were over the horsemen. Okay, here King Antiochus, he had the opportunity to take a different direction. Right? He could have seen the failure of his father, could have seen all the failed battles that they've had, and he had complete now authority where he could make a different decision. He could go on a different decision, but he did not. He continued in the same way as his father. Now, keep again, Philip was the one who was really kind of the one overseeing the king and certainly giving him advice and telling him things that he should do. But it's still technically his son is the one with the authority. And there even came to him mercenary armies from other kingdoms and from the islands of the sea. So other people, other Gentile nations coming to also participate in this battle. And the number of his army was 120,000 footmen and 20,000 horsemen and 32 elephants trained for battle. Okay, so this is the largest army so far that we've read about in the book of 1 Maccabees. All the other battles, when it explained the battles and the number of people, this is by far the largest number. Right? When I read this, kind of reminds me of like Lord of the Rings, where like every time, every battle, like it's more epic until finally, like at the end, it's like this gigantic battle that's like unbelievable. It's
elephants too.
Yeah, and there were elephants. Actually, when I saw that, I like never knew that elephants were actually used, and I figured maybe it was just a fictional thing. But then when I read this, it was like, oh, maybe that was a thing. The elephants.
The tanks.
Huh?
Like the tanks.
Yeah, they're like the tanks. And they traveled through Idumea, and they took a position near Beth-zur, and they fought for many days, and they made machines of war. But they came out and burnt them with fire, and they fought manfully. So these machines of war are like catapults. Like all these machines that they use to try to besiege from a long distance and to ram like gates of the fortresses and all these things. That maybe like that exist. I mean, even in more modern times than this, like during medieval times and stuff, you can see stuff like that. But they even at that time had more sophisticated ways of battle than simply just soldiers running, into battle. And Judas departed from the stronghold, and he moved the camp to Beth Zechariah. Okay, so here what happened is they burnt this fortification, right? They fought for many days, and they made machines of war, but they came out and burnt them with the fire, and they fought manfully. So the group of Israelites, they kind of escaped from that area, and they went to this other area. Judas departed from the stronghold, and he moved the camp to Beth Zechariah, opposite the camp of the king. And the king rose up before it was light, and he forced his troops to march toward the way of Beth Zechariah. And the armies prepared themselves for battle, and they sounded the trumpets. And they showed the elephants the blood of grapes and mulberries to provoke them to fight. So I guess this was a way for them to kind of like give like the taste of something in their mouth, which would like make them more energetic or more passionate in the fight, I guess. It's like blood of grapes just means like grape juice. It doesn't mean actual blood. And they divided the beasts by the legions, and there stood by every elephant 1,000 men with shields joined together and with brass helmets on their heads, and 500 well-ordered horsemen were chosen for every beast. So they give you kind of like, you can imagine all these different legions. Each legion had like an elephant with 1,000 men around it that had shields with brass helmets on their head. Like it's like a very scary scene. These were ready beforehand, and wherever the beast was, they were there, and whenever it moved, they moved, and they did not depart from it. Moreover, upon them there were strong wooden turrets, watching over every beast, with machines upon them. And on them were 32 valiant men who fought from above, and an Indian to rule the beasts. So where did they get these elephants? They got them from India, right? And these elephant handlers, these people that are used to like maybe warring with elephants, are from India, right? Because there's Indian elephants. And so each person who was on the elephant, like controlling it, was actually Indian. And the rest of the horsemen he stationed here and there in two parts, with trumpets to stir up the army and to urge on those who were slow to move within its legions. And so, and this is amazing, when the sun reflected off the shields of gold and of brass, the mountains were resplendent from them, and they glowed like lamps of fire. Again, like it reminds me of Lord of the Rings. Like, see this scene where there's like uncountable number of people, and the sun is shining down, and there's so much reflection of light that it actually like glows, you know, when you look at it. That's how large the army was, 120,000. And part of the king's army was divided to the high mountains, and the other part to the low mountains. And they went forth with order and caution. And all the inhabitants of the land were shaken at the voice of their multitude, and at the advance of the company, and at the clash of the armor, for the army was very great and strong. And Judas and his army drew near for battle. And there fell of the king's army 600 men. Okay, so there was a very small skirmish where Judas like attacked, okay, and the king's army, 600 men fell. Okay, so obviously they didn't like attack the whole thing, and they were able to kill 600. And Eleazar the son of Sora saw one of the beasts shielded with the king's shield, and it was higher than the other beasts. So it seemed to him that the king must be on it. So he noticed in the whole army that there was one of these beasts that had a special kind of shield on it that had the insignia of the king, and it was a little higher than the other. So he said, this must be where the king is, this man Eleazar. And he gave himself for the freedom of his people and to obtain for himself a name in eternity. Okay, so what is he getting ready to do? Yeah, he's getting ready to go and attack this on his own, by himself. Now, what is he saying is the reason he did this? To obtain for himself what? A name in eternity. Now, do you remember in chapter 5 when we read about Joseph and Azariah? Do you remember what they did?
Attacked the king's armies as well. Well, Judas was gaining the fame they wanted some as well.
Right. So there was a time where there was two battles going on at the same time. There was Simon was sent to battle in the north in Galilee, and then Judas went to the east to fight another battle and to bring back some people who were imprisoned in the fortress. Okay, and they told Joseph and Azariah, who were still in Judah, they told them, stay here, don't leave, and don't do any battles or anything. They told them just stay there. So Joseph and Azariah, when they saw that the other battles were successful, and they saw that like these people were heroes, they thought, we want to do what do you remember what it said? We want to make a name for ourselves. Right? And so they went against what Judas had told them, and they went and went to battle, and they had to flee from the battle because they were not successful. And we said the reason that they fled and the reason that this was not a sanctioned battle is because their motivation for the battle was simply to become heroes. This is what they want. They wanted to be known, right? They were not fighting for the right reason. And so we said, because they said they want to make a name for themselves, it was selfish. Here, though, what is the reasoning for this man? When he says he wants to obtain a name, obtain for himself a name in eternity. This is different than saying a name for himself. He's not interested about what other people have to say about him. Right? He's not interested in being a war hero. He's interested in shedding his blood for the nation. That he wants to serve the nation, and he's willing even to die for the nation. Okay? So his name is in eternity, not among the people. And this is what Christ speaks about love when he says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. So he was willing to lay down his life for the entire nation, for all the people he was fighting with, and he wasn't looking for anything selfish for himself. Okay? He says what? He wanted this for the freedom of his people.
A name in eternity may be the book of life.
Right, that's what I mean. He wants a name, meaning he wants an eternal name, like in salvation, right? He's not looking for selfish reasons. He's looking for to share this with the other people. And he ran up to it boldly in the midst of the legion, killing on the right and on the left, and they fell down before him on this side and that. And he went between the feet of the elephant and put himself under it, and he killed it. And it fell to the ground upon him, and he died there. So he went and he attacked the elephant where the king was on top of it. From underneath, the elephant fell right on top of him, and he died.
How can an elephant be that high?
What, you mean in this picture?
Yeah.
I mean, whoever drew it kind of maybe exaggerated a little bit, but elephants are pretty tall. Have you ever seen an elephant? Yeah. And seeing the strength of the king and the forcefulness of his army, they turned themselves away from them. So, Judas and his group, like, they still see, like, this is a very powerful army, and so they retreated. They said, we're not going to try to engage them now because there's too many of them. But the king's camp went up against them in Jerusalem, and the king's camp took up a position near Judea and Mount Zion. And he made peace with those who were in Bethzer, and they went out of the city, because they had no provisions in their confinement, for it was the Sabbath of the land. And the king captured Bethzer, and he stationed a garrison there to keep it. Okay? And he turned his camp against the place of sanctification for many days. What is the place of sanctification? Temple. And he stationed there catapults and other machines to cast fire, and windlasses to cast stones, and darts, and small catapults to cast arrows. I mean, look at all these things he has. He has something to launch, like fireballs, and stones, and catapults with arrows, like... But they also made machines against their machines. So the Jews also made machines, and they fought for many days. But there were no foods in the city, because it was the 7th year, and those who had remained in Judea were from the Gentiles. So they consumed all that they had left from what had been stored up. What does it mean when it says it was the 7th year? What is the 7th year?
The Jubilee?
The Jubilee is the 7 years. So after 50 years. So it's not saying that it was a Jubilee, but that's close. So what is the 7th year? What is the significance of the 7th year?
That's the land rest.
Yes. Right? You want to say something?
I thought, wasn't that also like all slaves or any of those who were indebted got to be released from their...
That's in the Jubilee.
Okay.
So like everything was broken up into groups of 7 years. And after 7 of those groups of 7, so after 49 years, then the next year is the year of Jubilee. Okay? And that's when what you're talking about happens, where all the slaves are freed and everybody's like properties returned to them and all of that. So I'm going to read for you in Leviticus 25 when it describes what is the 7th year. Okay? And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow on your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine. For it is a year of rest for the land, and the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you. For you, your male and female servants, your hired men, and the strangers who dwells with you. For your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, all its produce shall be food for you. Okay, so essentially, that 7th year is a Sabbath day. Sabbath means 7, right? So it's the Sabbath year of the land, where they were not to sow their fields. So the food was, like, they were to use food that was already stored, right, to eat from, because they were not growing new food. So the food was not very plentiful at this time, right? And because they were, locked up in the city with the walls around them, and they had to just consume whatever it is that they had in the land, and they couldn't go out because around them were all their enemies, right? So the food is now depleting, essentially. And there remained in the holy places a few men, for the famine had prevailed over them, and they were scattered each one to his own place. Then Lysias heard that Philip, whom King Antiochus had appointed, so remember, Philip is the one who is responsible for the son, Antiochus. When he was still alive to raise his son, Antiochus and to reign, had returned from Persia and Media with the army that went with him, and that he sought to take upon himself the affairs of the kingdom. So Philip and young Antiochus have returned now from Persia, right, where they were, because they were there with Antiochus the king, Antiochus IV. They've returned now, and essentially they want to now take back control of everything and continue with this war. He hurried to go and say to the king and the commanders of the army, "We are weakened every day, and our food is limited, and the place that we besiege is strong, and it is incumbent upon us to put the kingdom in order. And so now let us bestow a pledge to these men and make peace with them and with all their nation." He's saying, let's make a peace treaty. "And let us establish for them that they may walk according to their own laws, just as before. For because of their laws, which we despise, they have become angry and have done all these things." So they're saying, you know what, all of this battle is because we wanted them to change their law, we wanted them to change their religion, so let's just make a peace treaty and tell them, you follow your own laws, and you follow your own faith, just like the Romans were going to do after them. So it was a very good plan. And the idea was pleasing in the sight of the king and the leaders. And he sent to them to make peace, and they accepted it. And the king and the leaders swore to them, and they went out of the stronghold. Okay. Then the king entered into Mount Zion, and saw the fortifications of the place, and so he abruptly broke the oath that he had sworn, and he commanded the surrounding wall to be destroyed. Right? So it's like after he made peace, and now kind of all the tension is down, so now he's entering into Mount Zion, he's entering into Jerusalem, and he's seeing all the fortifications and everything, and then he decided, you know what, no, we're going to take it. Okay, he coveted this city. Okay, and kind of like make a comparison to now, like in the Holy Land, everybody wants everything in the Holy Land. Everybody, like there's everything, there's a battle everywhere in the Holy Land of who owns what, and what belongs to who and everything, because everybody wants a piece of it. And he departed in haste and returned to Antioch, where he found Philip ruling the city. And he fought against him and occupied the city. Now this is like another twist, okay? Like Antiochus, this young king, he is even rebelling against Philip, who was the person that his father had appointed to raise him. Okay, so we don't know how old he is at this point, but he's obviously old enough to be making decisions on his own, and he's rejecting the advice of Philip. Okay, and he's even fighting against Philip. Okay, so what does this kind of remind us of? What other parallel about a king who comes to reign and makes foolish decisions?
Oh,
No, close.
so?
No, after Solomon. Who's after Solomon? Who's the first one right after Solomon? Rehoboam. Rehoboam is the son of Solomon, and when he became king, people from his kingdom came to him and they told him, the work is too hard for us, ease the work for us. And so Rehoboam had to decide whether to comply with what they said, and so he took the advice of two groups. One group was like the old wise men of the kingdom, and they told him, yes, they're going to love you if you ease the work for them, and they're going to obey you forever. And then he got the advice of his friends, and they're like, no, we got to make the work even harder for them so they respect you. And so he ended up choosing the latter, right? That's what actually caused the division of the northern and southern kingdom, that bad decision. Because those people, they decided, well, we're not going to even be a part of your kingdom anymore, and we're going to go start our own kingdom, essentially. So listening to bad advice or to rejecting good advice, right? It's one of the hallmarks of immature kings. Okay, because when you become king, now you're like, okay, you know what? I'm powerful. I can do what I want, and I don't have to listen to anybody. And so here he is, breaking this oath. I mean, Lysias, who has been the commander fighting against these people, he has a lot of experience with them, a lot of experience with the battle, and he's the one who recommended this. He's the one who recommended, let's just make peace with them, and everything will be better. Okay, that's chapter 6. Let's move on now to chapter 7. Chapter 7 completely changes gears. So far, everything we've been talking about has been within the context of Israel and what's happening between the Jews and the Seleucids. Right? What's happening between the Jews and the Seleucids. But that's not the only political stuff happening in the region at the time. Now remember, there are other nations, other empires, other kingdoms that are in the area. Okay? And now we're going to start to see some stuff that's been happening. So what is some backstory here? Okay? Here it says, in the 151st year, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, departed from the city of Rome, and he went up with a few men to a maritime city, and he reigned there. Okay, so it's like this is completely unrelated to everything we were just reading. Okay, so what is the background here? Antiochus IV, he was the original king that we read about at the beginning of Maccabees. Okay, he was the younger brother of someone named Seleucus IV. Okay. Seleucus IV was actually reigned in the kingdom before him. Like the king before Antiochus IV was Seleucus IV, who was his brother. Okay? And Antiochus IV seized the kingdom from his older brother. Okay? And Seleucus had a son whose name was Demetrius. And this is the Demetrius we're reading about here. Okay? So you have Antiochus and Seleucus, brothers. Seleucus was the king. Antiochus took the kingdom over from his brother. So who was actually the rightful king? Because Seleucus died. Who was actually the rightful king at that point?
Demetrius.
Demetrius, the son of Seleucus. Okay? So all of this time where King Antiochus IV is doing all of this stuff, he's not even the rightful king of the Seleucids at this point. Right? Demetrius is the rightful king because he is the son of the previous king. Okay? So again, this man Demetrius, he is the nephew of Antiochus. Okay, the one who now has died, right? But left the kingdom in his son's possession. So Demetrius and Antiochus V, now the new king, they're cousins. So Demetrius now wants the kingdom. Okay, so here we're saying what? Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, departed from the city of Rome. Demetrius was taken as a hostage into Rome during war. Okay, and he was there for some time. And now he's free from Rome, and he is now able now to go and to claim his kingdom. And it happened as he entered into the house of the kingdom of his fathers, the army captured Antiochus and Lysias to bring them to him. Okay, so he captured Antiochus and Lysias, the two men that we were just talking about, the ones that have been waging war and doing all this stuff. They are now captured by Demetrius. And the matter became known to him, and he said, "Do not show me their face." And so the army killed them, and Demetrius sat upon the throne of his kingdom. So Demetrius heard that these men, Lysias and Antiochus the fifth, okay, had been captured by his men. And when he found out that this was the case, he didn't even want to talk to them. He didn't want to see them. He just had them executed. Okay? So they are gone now, right? So the rightful king, or not the rightful, but the one who was going to be king or who was acting as king is now dead. So now you've got like a completely different political situation happening. And there came to him iniquitous and impious men from Israel. And Alchemist was their leader who wanted to be made a priest. So as maybe we all know, whenever there is power and new people come to power, other people want to go and to win their favor. Right? Anytime a new person comes to power, you want like other people who come to him and try to win their favor. Right? And it's very common. We even see it in the church. Like, there's a new bishop that was enthroned. Everybody wants to go and be nice with the bishop because they want the bishop to like them. Or a new priest in the church, everybody's going to go talk, they want to make sure the priest likes them. Okay? We saw the same thing happen with King David when he became king. Right? When he became king, all these people came to him and it's like, "Oh, David, we love you and you're great." Right? So anytime somebody is in power, he's going to always be surrounded by people that might not be very genuine in their desire in their relationship with him. And this could be true of any of us. Like any of us could have people around us that just want to use us. They just want something from us. And so we have to be very careful and wise in the way that we understand those who are around us. What are their true intentions to me? I shouldn't just believe everyone in a naive way. I can trust people, yes, but I also have to be alert. So this man, Alchemist, he wanted to be a priest. And they accused the people to the king, saying, "Judas and his brothers have destroyed all your friends, and he has scattered us from the land." So look, they're coming to give like this very one-sided a view. They're like giving him an update. Okay, Demetrius, you're the new king now. Let's tell you what's been going on. There's this group of people, Judas and his brothers, these Maccabees, they're destroying all of us and they're scattering us from our land, and we're doing like he's painting it like as though Judas is the bad guy. Okay, obviously. And he's telling Demetrius this. Now therefore send a man whom you trust, and let him go and see all the destruction he has done to us and to the regions of the king, and let him punish all his friends and their helpers. And so the king chose from among his friends Bacchidus, who ruled across the great river in the kingdom, and who was faithful to the king. And he sent him to see the destruction that Judas had done. Moreover, he appointed the wicked Alchemist to the priesthood, and he commanded him to take revenge on the sons of Israel. So Demetrius completely complies, and he's going to send someone to go see exactly what Judas has been doing. He appoints this man Alchemist to the priesthood, and he tells them to go and to take revenge. So now Alchemist is a tool of Demetrius of the Seleucids. And even more dangerously, he is a Jewish priest. So when he comes to the Jews, they're going to see him as a Jewish priest, as someone with a lot of influence, right? So he's in a very powerful position, this man. And they rose up and came forth with a great army into the land of Judah. And they sent messengers who spoke to Judas and his brothers with words of peace in deceitfulness. But they did not heed their words, for they saw that they arrived with a great army. Right? Like you have these people coming from the Greeks with a gigantic army against Israel, and they're just saying, oh, we just want peace. Right? So he didn't believe them. He's like, well, if you're going to come for peace, why are you coming with a gigantic army? You don't need a gigantic army for peace. Right? And so Judas saw through what they were doing, and he didn't accept their offer of peace. Then there assembled to Alchemists and Bacchidus a congregation of scribes to seek just terms. Okay? So these congregation of scribes, these are people that are respecting Alchemists as being a priest. And first the Hasidians, who were among the sons of Israel, also sought peace from them. So remember, we said the Hasidians were like a group of Jews that held to the law very strictly. For they said, a man who is a priest from the offspring of Aaron has arrived. He will not deceive us. Right? So they're going to trust him because he is a priest. And again, these people are very attached to the law. So they naively thought, well, because this man is a priest, that means everything he says has to be true. And he spoke to them peaceful words, and he swore to them, saying, we will not carry out any evil against you or your friends. And they believed him. And he captured 60 of their men and killed them in one day, according to the word that is written. The flesh of your saints and their blood they have poured out all around Jerusalem, and there was no one who would bury them. Then fear and trembling hovered over all the people, for they said, there is no truth or judgment among them, for they have transgressed the agreement and the oath that they swore. And Bacchidus moved the camp from Jerusalem, and he took up a position at Beth-Zaith. And he sent and captured many of those who had fled from him, and some of the people he killed in sacrifice, and he threw them into a great pit. And he committed the country to Alchemists, and he left behind troops with him to assist him. And so Bacchidus went away to the king. Okay, so there is both political corruption and now also religious corruption. Okay, because now Alchemist is coming and he is deceiving the people. And Alchemist did what he pleased by the means of his leadership of the priesthood. And all those who disturbed the people assembled before him, and they obtained the land of Judah, and they caused a great scourging in Israel. And Judas saw all the evils that Alchemists and those who were with him did to the sons of Israel, even more than the Gentiles did. Right? Like if all the stuff that the Gentiles were doing against them, all that we've read so far was bad, now he's saying the stuff that Alchemist, who is an insider, is doing is now even worse. And this also teaches us something, like our friends can hurt us much more than our enemies. Right? Like friends can hurt us much more than strangers. Because someone who's coming from the outside, I'm going to have a limited trust, right? I'm not going to allow them to come very close. And so if they want to attack me, they have to attack me from the outside, right? But if someone that I really trust and is close to me, I allow them on the inside, and then they betray me, they can completely destroy me, right? Here, this man Alchemist, as a priest, he won the trust of the people, and when he came and was accepted and respected, and he had influence, and they listened to him, now he was able to do a kind of destruction that was far worse than those that the Gentiles were doing. Because when the Gentiles came, they said, oh, well, these are foreigners, we're not going to trust them. But when Alchemist came, they said, oh, well, he's a priest, he has to be telling the truth. And he went out into all the parts of surrounding Judea, and he took vengeance on the men who had rebelled, and they ceased to go forth into the region any longer. But Alchemist saw that Judas and those who were with him prevailed, and he knew that he was not able to withstand them. And so he returned to the king, and he accused them of many crimes. So he didn't try to fight against Judas, because they had been so successful. He went back to Demetrius, the king, and he's telling them about Judas and how he's going to want a bigger force to be sent after him. And the king sent Nicanor, one of his principal noblemen, who was a cultivator of hostility against Israel, and he commanded him to overthrow the people. And Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a great army, and he sent to Judas and his brothers words of peace with deceitfulness, saying, "Let there be no fighting between me and you. I will come with a few men to see your faces with peace." Okay, he's again wanting to make like a promise of peace, but this time he's saying, "I'm going to come with just a few men." And he came to Judas, and they greeted one another in turns peaceably, and the enemies were prepared to abduct Judas. And the plan became known to Judas, and he came to him with deceit. And so he became very afraid of him, and he was no longer willing to see his face. Okay? This is similar to the story of St. Paul, when the people were plotting to kill him, and St. Paul found out about this plan, and so he was able to escape. Here Judas finds out that they're planning to abduct him, and so he doesn't want to see them. And Nicanor knew that his plan had been exposed, and he went out to meet Judas in battle, near Salema. There fell of the army of Nicanor nearly 5,000 men, and they fled into the city of David. And after these events, Nicanor ascended to Mount Zion, and some of the priests of the people went out to greet him in peace, and to show him the holocausts that were offered to the king. Okay, so there are people that believed that Nicanor was actually friendly, okay, with the Jews. And they allowed him to go up to Mount Zion, and they were showing him like their sacrifices that they were offering and so on. But he mocked and despised them, and he defiled them, and he spoke arrogantly, and he swore with anger, saying, "Unless Judas and his army have been delivered into my hands when I return in peace, I will burn this house." And he went out with great anger. And the priests went in and stood before the face of the altar and the temple. And weeping they said, "You, O Lord, have chosen this house, so that your name may be invoked in it, so that it may be a house of prayer and a supplication of your people. Accomplish vindication with this man and his army, and let them fall by the sword. Remember their blasphemies, and do not allow them to continue." So here we hear, which is not very often in this book actually, but here we read this prayer that they offered to God, asking him for help to expel these people and to kill all of these enemies of Israel. Then Nicanor departed from Jerusalem, and he positioned his camp near Beth-horon, and an army of Syria met him there. And Judas took a position in Adasa with 3,000 men. And Judas prayed, and he said, "O Lord, when those who were sent by King Sennacherib blasphemed against you, an angel went out and struck 185,000 of them." What is this referring to? Who is King Sennacherib?
Wait, that's from the story of Tobit.
It's the same Sennacherib.
Yeah.
But this did not happen in the story of Tobit. But it's the same king. So Sennacherib was king of the Assyrian Empire. Okay? And this is recorded in 2 Kings 19. So this is historical. This is not at the same time period. He's remembering something that happened in the past. King Sennacherib was a king of Assyria. And king of Assyria came to Jerusalem to attack it. Okay? This was before the fall to the Babylonians. Okay? He came at the time of King Hezekiah. Right? And we read about King Hezekiah's faithfulness and how he prayed to God and asked God to save the people. And this angel came in the middle of the night and destroyed this 185,000 people. Like in the morning, all 185,000 soldiers that were there getting ready to destroy the city, they were dead. Okay? And this is in 2 Kings 19. You can read this story. So he's remembering this. Okay? And he's saying, "O Lord, when those who were sent by King Sennacherib blasphemed against you, an angel went out and struck 185,000 of them." So he's again, as we've seen in the past, he's invoking the faithfulness of God in the past. Again, whenever we like are dealing with situations, it's so helpful to us, like when we pray, to remember the faithfulness of God that He practiced with us and with others in our families and with those in the Bible, to remind us of His faithfulness, and that we want God to act again, just as He acted before. Just so, crush this army in our sight today, and so let the others know that he has spoken evil against your sanctuary, and judge him according to his wickedness. This is the prayer of Judas. And the armies were sent into battle together on the 13th day of the month of Adar. And the camp of Nicanor was crushed, and he himself was among the first slain in the battle. So then, when his army saw that Nicanor had fallen, they threw away their weapons and fled. And they pursued them for 1 day's journey from Edessa, even until one comes into Kazara, and they sounded the trumpets after them with signals. And they went forth from all the towns all around Judea, and they herded them with the horns, and they turned back again to them, and they were all felled with the sword, and there was not so much as one of them left behind. And they took their spoils like prey, and they cut off the head of Nicanor and his right hand, which he had extended arrogantly, and they brought it and hung it opposite Jerusalem. So you see, this is like the power of the prayer that they prayed. And the people rejoiced exceedingly, and they spent that day in great joy, and he established that this day should be kept every year on the 13th day of the month of Adar. And the land of Judah was quieted for a brief time. What was special about the 13th day of the month of Adar? Okay, this day became known as Nicanor Day. Okay, and it was practiced at that time, like on a yearly basis, but it's no longer practiced by the Jews as like a yearly celebration. But on the 14th day of the month of Adar, there is something that's practiced today. Okay, you know what it is? Somebody mentioned it last week.
Purim?
Purim, yes. So what is Purim?
The book of Esther.
Yes, it's in the book of Esther. So what are they commemorating? What are they celebrating?
They hung 10 men.
Well, so there was a specific day that something happened, and they were celebrating that day. What was the result of Esther's prayers and Esther's supplication to the king?
The Jews were allowed to defend themselves on that day.
Yes. So remember, in the book of Esther, what did the king command? He commanded that the Jews be killed. And at that time, he did that because Haman told him to do that. And so in his ignorance, he did that. Later, when he found out what the plan was and Haman was evil and all of that, he wanted to undo what he did. But the problem is at the time they considered like anything that the king said would be kind of like unchangeable, cannot be changed.
Yeah.
So he could not go tell the people, okay, don't do it. But what he did do is he could tell the Jews and warn them ahead of time that this was going to happen, and he gave them permission to defend themselves. Okay? And so this day was the 14th of Adar, the day of Purim. Okay? And so this is what's celebrated. Glory be to God forever, amen. So again, these two chapters continue the story, and so we're going to continue. This book has a total of 16 chapters. So I know there's like a lot of politics and things going on, but it really helps us to understand like that God works in all these different levels. And it's really amazing when you think about it. Like God works on the very small personal level, on like the day-to-day level. He works like in small decisions and big decisions that are personal, but he also works on like the scale of nations. Right? Like on the scale of what's going to happen with an entire nation, with an entire people, and not only in the present, but how these changes are going to affect that nation and the world in the future. Okay? So you see God working here in so many ways. Any questions or comments about this?
I have a question from me and from chapter 6. Since chapter 6, like, why didn't anybody help Eliezer in this, to attack?
So, I mean, it sounds like Eliezer just took this kind of decision on his own. He saw that, he recognized that this elephant was, the king was on it, and he just was so zealous, he just went and attacked without making any kind of plan, without telling anybody. I mean, probably if people asked him, or if he asked people, they would have probably told him, maybe it's not the best idea. He's like running right into the midst of this huge army by himself. And again, the imagery, he's like killing people on his left and on his right and all this, and he finally gets there, and he doesn't even know how to kill the king. I mean, the king is up on the elephant. The fastest thing he could do is just kill the elephant. But in the end, he didn't actually like advance the war, really. He was just so zealous for wanting to do something. Yeah. Okay, let's pray.